Hey, this is Neon for CLOWNFISH TV, and I have a special guest this week on our show, Mr. Aaron Sparrow. Introduce yourself, Mr. Sparrow.
Hey, everybody. My name's Aaron Sparrow. I write comics for Disney on occasion, amongst others.
Awesome.
And psyched to be here.
Cool. So Aaron and I go way back, actually. We both work on Disney comics. We never actually worked together, though. We always seem to keep missing each other somehow. But
I've never been allowed to hire everybody that I wanted to hire.
That's a whole nother story. Yeah, Aaron's on the show today. We're going to talk a little bit about the comic book industry, the state of the comic book industry, and maybe the state of some of the major geek figures out there. We'll get into that later. But Aaron, why don't you tell everybody how you got into comics? I actually don't even know how you got into comics.
Oh, okay. I knew that I wanted to work in comics since I was a little kid. I started out drawing, and then my grandmother thought it would be a great idea. There was a Marvel artist. I don't even remember who. This is how long ago it was. She was like, I'll take Aaron to meet this comic book artist. It'll be really great. And he completely discouraged me from being a comic book artist.
Oh my God.
Basically, whenever I do an impression of him, I do like I'm taking a drag on the cigarette. He wasn't smoking, but that was kind of his attitude.
Right.
You don't want to get into comics, kid. Be a dentist. You can't make any money in comics. So I was discouraged from drawing, and I stopped drawing for years. And then later, when I decided that I still wanted to maybe try to be creative, I got into writing and knew that I wanted to try and make it in comics. My first comics gig, I got hired as a copy editor at Tokyo Pop.
Okay.
When they were really big and manga was really huge. And I worked for them for a few years, and I moved on to doing a lot of the writing on the adaptations. They'd get these translations in for the Japanese comics, and going from Japanese to English, the dialogue would be really wonky, and there'd be jokes that didn't translate just because of cultural differences. So it was my job to kind of punch it up, and I as I was editing it, I started making suggestions, and the editors eventually said, well, why don't we just have you write the adaptations? So that was how I kind of got my feet wet with writing comics. And then from there, I did an original project for Blizzard for the Warcraft Legends anthology, and then I eventually ended up at Boom Studios in charge of the Disney Pixar Muppets line.
Yeah, which was pretty excellent, except for that one issue of DuckTales. But you were thankfully not involved with that, as I understand.
No, I was gone at that point. It was kind of funny. It was a big struggle with that line, and people say like, oh, was it hard working with Disney? And I always tell them, no, it was actually really easy working with Disney Publishing. Our liaison at the time was Jesse Post,
mm-hmm.
and he was great. He was open to ideas, like he was enthusiastic. He wanted to do amazing things with the line. I actually ran into more resistance from the publisher I was working for than I ever did with Disney.
Yeah, good old DuckTales #3. Definitely, if you can track down the copy, check it out. It's I don't even know how to describe it. It's a beautiful mess. Really,
if I recall, Cartoon Brew called it the worst Disney comic of all time.
I think they were mock-up pages or something that actually snuck into the book, or they ran out of money for art, but they actually had pages toward the end of the book where it looked like they cut and pasted thumbnails into the actual, like the same character over and over and over again. Like they would
That's
just flip
exactly
them.
What they did. And then they moved their arms around. But it was
freaking bizarre. I can't even believe it made it to the stands. I really can't.
Well, at that point, I don't think that they were submitting things for approval at that point, which is how Boom Studios ended up losing the license.
Oh my God! Yeah, I was not involved. Boom didn't like me. So
I wanted to hire you. We could.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe we don't want to get into that, but yeah, no, there was definitely resistance to hiring you and some of the other people that I wanted to hire.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, my bosses would try to dump people that they didn't have any work for on the studio's side. They would try to make me hire them because they wanted to give them work, but they didn't have anything for them. So it was just like, oh, they'll be a good fit for Disney. And it was like, I had an open pitch policy. I wasn't one of the editors that kind of, that was like a gatekeeper or only wanted to hire friends of mine.
Mm.
If you hit me up with a pitch and I liked it, I would submit it to see if you could get hired. And unfortunately, a lot of people that they handed me would turn in pitches that then I didn't feel strong on, but I would be ordered to submit them, and then Disney and Pixar would reject them, and then I would kind of get the blame for that, like, oh, well, you should have got it through. And it's like, it this is Disney and Pixar, guys.
Yeah.
Who the hell am I?
Yeah. No, I'll go. I'll talk about it because this actually just kind of segue into some of the other things I want to talk about with you concerning the state of the comic book industry. I, as I understand it, didn't get hired by Boom. I've heard from multiple people because I posted their sales numbers on a Disney forum, and apparently people don't like that because I also got drug into the current state of the comic book industry by posting some really bad comic book numbers. And so I was sort of jumped by comic book professionals for being so negative. You shouldn't be negative about the comic book industry. You should just believe that everything's okay. It's all fine.
I think there's a difference between being negative and being realistic.
Yeah.
I was looking at some numbers this week, and the industry's down 10% from last year, and we just seem to keep dipping, and no one seems overly concerned with finding the reason for that. And I think there's probably multiple factors that go into it. But just putting our heads in the sand and saying no, everything's fine, I think is a really bad idea, and I don't think ultimately serves anybody.
No, and literally, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. I actually got into it with a pretty notable comics journalist about Meltdown Comics melting down, and I said, is it time to panic yet? Because for Meltdown to go under, that is now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're out in California. That was like the epicenter for geek culture in LA, wasn't it? Meltdown was a huge deal.
Yeah, I had been on a few podcasts. We'd gone out and recorded in the studios there. Whenever I was in LA, I would pop into their store and see what they had because it was huge. It was a huge store, huge piece of real estate, which I imagine got quite expensive. I don't know if they owned the building or not. I assume they were. They've been there so long. I just kind of always assumed that they did. But if they didn't, that rent had to keep going up, and the comics pie is getting smaller and smaller. Comic sales, everybody's touting the fact that, right now it's, the comics industry is making more than last year, but it's selling less units.
Yeah.
It's selling a lot of units. It's just they've raised the prices on things. So they're just milking a very small number of fans for more and more of their money. But the industry itself is not expanding. So that's alarming to me. And I think that not talking about it is a really bad idea. I'm sorry if it makes people uncomfortable that, these facts are happening, but I'm sorry that the house is on fire. I'm sorry that it's making you uncomfortable that I'm talking about it, but somebody needs to get a fire extinguisher.
Well, I think that's really what is going on with this. I don't know what else to call it, this Comicsgate situation, is that you have some very outspoken comics fans pointing out the fact that the comic industry is basically in the gutter right now, and because of politics, you have comics publishers and creators basically refusing to listen or just sort of blowing these guys off. And I do understand politics comes into it somewhat, but even when they have legitimate criticism, legitimate understanding of how the markets work and all that, it's amazing how far these publishers and creators will bury their heads in the sand to just turn an eye or blind eye to the fact that the comic book industry is dying. There's no other way to say it. I don't know. It's not going to get better. This is grandpa on his deathbed. Okay. And he might not die tomorrow, but he's not going to make it for the long haul. And they just do not seem to get that, and trying the same things that they've been doing over and over again just doesn't. This is my opinion, but it's not working. It's not working.
Well, I think there's only so many times that you can go back to the well of 28 covers on a book or launching a new number one. I think that in Marvel's numbers you're starting to see diminishing returns on some of that. How many Captain Marvel books can you put back out with a new number one? How many times can you relaunch something, and sometimes relaunch it with the same creative team? So it kind of it gets to the point where if I wasn't buying it before because I didn't like the creative team, coming out with a new number one with the same creative team is not going to get me to maybe this time it'll be different. It's like being a battered spouse.
Oh my God! Yes.
How many times can I go back and say this time it'll be different?
It's sort of like the marketing. Okay, so I heard they're bringing Iceman back with the same. Is that correct? They're bringing Iceman back with the same creative team. Iceman was canceled. Isn't this sort of like bringing the Arch Deluxe back? does anybody like, I mean, clearly the market is not there. And I see these, especially with Marvel. It's almost like they're really trying to, like, well, they don't like it the first 9 times, but the 10th time's a charm. We'll sell more than 10,000 issues. I swear. People are going to love these characters. They're going to love these characters. And they don't.
In the case of Iceman in particular, I think it's only been I wasn't, and forgive me if I'm wrong about this, but because I wasn't reading the book, but
nobody was. That was a problem.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's only been a few months since they canceled it.
Yeah.
So how much retooling can you really do in just a few months? Like, just the timing seems like they canceled it, and then maybe like 2 months went by, and then they were already working on the new one to get it solicited for a couple months from now. So I don't know how much retooling you're going to do. I mean, you'll get that initial #1 sales bump, and maybe you'll get 8 issues out of it before you have to cancel it again. But if the numbers, if people don't show up this second time, what are you going to do? Are you going to relaunch it again in another 3 months with the new #1 and just try again?
Yes.
How many times can you do that?
30 or 40 every year. Every year, new #1s every year. I don't understand, because when I was a kid reading comics, like, I would jump into comic series that were already on issue 150, 200. They did not feel the need to reboot comics over and over and over. You're trying to bring in new readers. This is not the way to bring in new readers. Like, this is confusing as hell for anybody to come into it.
I don't know where to jump into anything anymore.
No.
And none of the characters, I don't recognize any of the characters anymore. It used to be that the characters had very distinctive personalities, and you had editorial who made sure that the characters remained consistent from creator to creator and writer to writer, in the way that they were portrayed. And I don't see that happening anymore. The last time I picked up a couple of books, it's like I read Miss Marvel when it came out, which those initial issues were very fun. But then I pick up the Champions, and it's a totally different character. I don't recognize, and I can go over to the Miss Marvel book that's still being published and read that, and her character is different from book to book. There's no consistency. And so where I used to, like, really be into the Marvel universe because everything was connected. What got me in as a kid was everything was connected, and everything felt like part of this larger world that I was jumping into. And now I just feel like it's a bunch of indie books.
That's exactly. I mean, it does. It feels like a disjointed indie universe that crosses over when it's convenient. But yeah, and I think a lot of the creators too. I mean, it really feels like Marvel, especially not so much DC, but Marvel does feel like almost like an indie comics publisher. Like, I don't know what happened when this happened. It almost is like they don't want to succeed commercially because it's like selling out or some such nonsense. It just seems like they're trying to fail. I just can't wrap my head around, like, Jim Shooter would freaking slap these guys around. I mean, he would just,
it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've actually met Shooter at a couple of shows, and he was my Marvel editor when I was he was the guy, and there was just such a mystique about those guys, back in the day. And when I meet him now, like, there's still that mystique. I still feel like, oh man, Jim Shooter could, like, walk in there, and if they just gave him the ability to, he could start writing the ship.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the philosophies that he had, not every, and I've read a lot of things. Some creators thought that some of his ideas were bad, and I'm sure not every idea was good. But for the most part, he was there to sell books. And I think that's kind of what the industry has lost is this idea that you've got to get people to put the money down for these books. And you've got, I know that you're competing with, like, torrent sites and things like that. Well, those sites need to be cracked down on. I don't see anybody doing it. Like, every issue of Darkwing that we did within 1 or 2 days of it being released was up on a torrent site. And people on these sites are praising it and saying how great it was. And, I really love what they're doing. And it's like, well, we're not going to be able to do it for long because you're not buying it. You're reading it for free.
Blame webcomics. Because webcomics we have an entire generation of comics readers who are used to getting everything for free. I mean, I'm not running down web. I mean, I do a webcomic. I've actually made money doing webcomics, not running down webcomics, but it really has, like, the next generation of comics readers are not used to going to the store and plunking down $2, $3, $4, $5 for a comic book. They've got an all-you-can-eat buffet out there that's what they're used to. Same with YouTube. I mean, YouTube, it's endless content for free. I mean, that mindset's really hard to, when your audience is younger, or you're hoping to get a younger audience, it's very hard to kind of break them of that habit. And which is a better deal, paying $8, $10 a month for Netflix, or buying 2 comic books that take you 10 minutes to read,
Yeah. Yeah, you've got like an unlimited number of things that you can watch on Netflix, which is funny because even though it's unlimited, I often find myself going through going, no.
Yeah, it's like unlimited crap. Lots and lots of crap.
I keep making fun of some movie that I keep scrolling past. It's called Money Heist.
Like, what other kind of heist would there be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Jewelry Heist will be the sequel. Each one they'll be heisting something different. But it just makes me laugh because Money Heist just seems so like counterintuitive. It's like, yeah, no, that's exact. Just call it heist.
It's like Money Bank. Welcome to the Money Bank. What do you do here?
One of my videos the other day, I heard the term trailer houses for the first time.
Trailer houses.
And I'd never heard that. Apparently that is a phrase that gets used, but I kind of compared it. I said, that's like, saying that I'm going to go eat some pasta food in my jeans apparel.
Oh God.
Too many words.
Awkward. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're kind of all over the place here with the comics thing, but it is interesting to get your feedback. Anytime talking to any other creators. I mean, I pretty much left comics except for my own stuff now, just because it's just the money's not there, and it's a political minefield, and I just really think it's going to be up to more creators coming forward and saying, hey, yeah, we've got a problem, let's fix it. Like, I don't care what your politics are, it's we have to fix this, or there's not going to be any comic book industry left for anybody.
Well, that was kind of the editor that, when I was doing editorial, that was always my philosophy, is I didn't care, what your background was, what religion you were, what your sexuality was, what your politics were. If you could write a solid story and move books, I wanted to work with you. I didn't have any kind of particular ideology. I mean, I may think that what you think politically is absolutely ridiculous, but as long as you're not putting ridiculous things in your book and you're telling solid stories, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, and that used to be the way things were, and now it just seems like, I mean, it almost seems, and this is where I kind of, again, got into the whole situation that's happening on Twitter now and happening in the comic book industry, where it's almost like new creators now are vetted by their political beliefs first, and if they happen to be able to draw or write okay, then we'll hire them. But really, again, this comes down to that club comics mentality where, to get into comics now, you have to have the right set of beliefs, you have to know the right people, and then if you've got some talent, cool. If you don't, we'll work on it. We'll get you in the door, and then we'll teach you how to write as we go along or something. It's just odd. It's just a very odd, unsustainable business model, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of. I've always been this way. I'm in favor of everybody coming to the party.
Yep.
I don't, but at the same time, comics is supposed to be escapism, and I understand that we're all upset about Trump, and we're all upset about politics, we're all upset about this and the other. But when I wake up every day and I live in that world, I don't need Captain America to be a Nazi. I need Captain America to be Captain America more than ever.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's just a lot of missteps. Everybody kind of wants to write their political manifesto with these characters that they don't own. And I think that in a lot of ways, it's hurting the industry, because even politics that I agree, there's a lot of comic writers that are writing things that I agree with, but I don't want it in my comic book.
Right.
It's like, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I understand, I totally agree. But I just gave you $5 and I want you to entertain me, and I want to escape from the real world for a while.
Yeah.
So I understand, when people say I don't want all this politics in my comic books. I mean, comic books have always had a political bend, but it was more subtle and done with a more deft hand, and I think was more even-handed in a lot lot of ways.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I keep joking with Cam. It kind of reminds me of those little Jack Chick tracks that they leave in your door, the religious tracks. It's like having those shoved in your face and then being asked to pay $4 for it, because it's sort of like, it's just a weird, I don't know, man. There's so many things going on in comics right now. that I
Even
just,
those tracks are more fun than some of the comics I've read lately.
oh my God. So, I mean, yeah, again, this comes down to like, I do agree that, you know, some of the folks that are complaining about the comics industry being too political, they've got a point. I mean, do I think that I mean, we talked before, you know, is there some trolling going on? Yeah, I think there's trolling going on both sides, really. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and that's the sad thing is that everybody always kind of gets defined by, it's why I'm not somebody who, I don't really apply labels to myself because I kind of hate that. You know, because you always get painted with the worst members of whatever your ideology is or whatever you know, it's like feminists get, you know, if you believe, you know, if you're a feminist, you get painted with like the craziest of the third wave feminist kind of people that put all men on an island and then bomb it. You know, it's like you get painted. If you're a Christian, you get painted with the Westboro Baptist Church.
Right.
If you're Muslim, you get painted with, you know, Islamic terrorism.
Right.
You know, we don't seem to have the ability to grasp any nuance anymore, or we don't want to take the time to recognize that human beings are complex and individuals, and you know, just because one person believes one piece out of this buffet of things that they can believe in, it doesn't mean that they subscribe to everything else that's, you know, and that is toxic about that belief system.
Yeah, and that's hard. I mean, like I had a hard time explaining to people because I was actually given the comics gators, you know, the benefit of the doubt. I said, look, I mean, this is what they're saying. I've done some research into this. I agree with this, and this. And they're like, you're an alt-right Nazi. It's like, dude, I haven't even voted Republican and I can't even remember when. So don't tell me I'm an alt-right anything. I'm not even right. But it doesn't matter because if you're there again, it's that new, like you can't, it fries their circuits to have people that aren't like 100% in whatever camp or whatever, you know, category they think they should be in, which is unfortunate because it's, you know, just America now, just America in general is that way. It's getting to the point of, God, I didn't want to leave my house. I just want to stay in my house and read comic books. I can't even do that anymore, right? I can't get away from it.
The arts used to be the place where the free thinkers went, and now it's like it's so dogmatic that you can't have any, like I was saying, you can't have any nuance to your thought, or you can't, you know, it's like you have to be 100% on board with every single thing that I believe, or you're a heretic and you must be, you know, you must be burned at the stake.
Well, that's what reminds me. I mean, that's what honestly the comic book industry now reminds me of a religious cult. I mean, it really, you have a lot of people who've kind of set themselves up as the gatekeepers, and not so much in terms of talent, but gatekeepers in terms of like the Spanish Inquisition, testing your belief system to make sure you're worthy of being part of this dying industry, which is just so ridiculous when you think about it. Like, my God, you can make more money working at Walmart. Why go through all the hassle to try to get into comic books in 2018?
There's comic book companies out there that are paying $75 a page for pencils, inks, and colors.
Yeah.
You know,
and kids they're doing it. They're doing it because they want to be in comics so badly that they're doing it.
Yeah. So if it takes you 2 days to do a page, what have you made? You would have made more at Walmart.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm hoping to do a video on, like what comic book artists actually make now. Now, there are some folks, you know, obviously that are higher up the food chain that are established. They're getting top like Marvel, DC page rates. I don't even know what Marvel's top rates are now. I've heard folks I know that work there. It's not good. It's nothing like it used to be.
I saw Sean Gordon Murphy tweet the other day. Someone said, you know, would you consider doing a Marvel book? And he said, I say this half jokingly, but they can't afford me.
Yeah, I believe it.
I believe it too, because I think everything that I've heard is that, you know, not that anybody's offered me a page right there, but everything that I've heard is that DC is paying so much better.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think DC gets enough credit. They are literally holding up the comic industry right now.
Yeah. I believe that. I believe that. Now it'll be interesting to see what happens with all the changes at the top at DC. You know, if that continues. You know, hopefully it is the case, but yeah, Marvel. I mean, I've said before, I've got myself in trouble, but I think that they were sort of an unwanted stepchild that came with the Disney acquisition, that Marvel wanted the IP for movies. And, oh, by the way, here's a comic book publisher, you know, and I just get the vibe that, you know, folks I've talked to, that I get the vibe that, you know, the page rates aren't good at Marvel because they're running a really tight ship at Marvel now because Disney's just not going to spend the money, you know, on comic books. Like they're trying to buy Fox. They're going to have to shell out $65 billion for Fox. They're not going to give some dude, you know, $400, $500 a page for some book that sells like 18,000 copies, you know?
Yeah. everybody's APs are going up. Get ready.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Big time. In fact, we did some stories today on the Disney board or Disney blog that I work for, and if Disney does buy Fox, like they're gonna have to cut costs. They're gonna have to cut some corners. And I was sitting here thinking about in my head, like Marvel's, they could very easily just like job all those comics out to some other publisher and save themselves a lot of hassle and a lot of salaries. You know?
Yeah, you wrote that story I think a year ago. That,
Yeah.
About could they just license out these books? And yeah, I think they definitely could. I mean, and I have a very like kind of morbid curiosity about what that would look like. What would an IDW Marvel look like? What would a Dark Horse Marvel look like? I'm sure Dark Horse could step up to the plate.
I think they could.
They used to do a fantastic job with the Star Wars books.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be the end of an era, but I can foresee it happening.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see why I'm sitting there like, Aaron's already thinking like, I want Power Pack, I want Cloak and Dagger, I want Howard the Duck, I want.
You know what? I'm so. It's so bizarre because when people ask me like, if Marvel came knocking, and then I start laughing, I'm like, that's never going to happen. But they want to know like, what books would you want? And my choices always seem really weird to them because I'm like, I feel like I could do Guardians of the Galaxy really well. I feel like I could do Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger is always on my list.
Cloak and Dagger is cool.
It's never succeeded, but like, it's like Doom Patrol at DC. Every writer artist is like, I'm the one who can make that work.
Yeah, Moon Knight. Yeah.
Oh, I love Moon Knight. Yeah, like all the weird like side characters. Like my favorite character is Captain America, but he's like lower on the totem pole of characters that I would want to crack at.
Yeah. I'd do Moon Knight. Moon Knight sounds fun. I'm gonna switch gears here. Now, actually, we've talked about comics for a little bit, so we're talking about kind of the change in pop culture. We talked about Meltdown, so this is sort of related to Meltdown, and really why we touch base because I haven't been following this, so I'm gonna let you kind of lead with this. But can we talk about Chris Hardwick for a little bit?
Yeah, it came out last week. His ex-girlfriend Chloe Dykstra, who is in every article I've seen, they list her as a cosplayer, but she's done like hosting gigs and things like that. I think that maybe like cosplayer is downplaying her career a little bit. But she accused him of abuse and sexual assault, and so accordingly, he's been his Talking with Hardwick show on AMC has been cut. And he's no longer hosting at Comic-Con because of the allegations. So it's just been kind of a weird, just another one of those Me Too moments where, here you've got this guy that, a lot of people thought really well of.
Right.
And then the allegations come out and he's radioactive now.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like completely out of left field. I was watching they have a Netflix, the story of Funko. And I was watching it, and they had the segment with Chris Hardwick on there. And I'm watching it, and he's got all his toys and stuff. I'm like, you're not going to have him for much longer, dude.
I think he's married to an heiress. I think he'll.
A Hearst. He's married to a Hearst. Yeah, he's got a ridiculous house. Ridiculous house, like a mansion.
Well, that was it's funny. That was the reason that I stopped following him on Instagram because when Walking Dead started, I started following him, and then his Instagram was just kind of like. It always seemed like it was just bragging about this latest thing that he got. Like, look at this table that's from Madagascar that was made by monks. And and I was just kind of like, you know what? This is, no.
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
So
comics and pop culture have not been that good to you, dude. You just married well.
I noped out pretty quick. But I know a lot of people in the LA comedy scene. And honestly, the allegations were not that surprising to me just based on what I've heard from people that worked with him or been in contact with him, people that know Chloe. Mm-hmm. Chris Gore came out pretty hard in the paint with saying that he's known about this for a while. It wasn't his story to tell, but he's seen what Chloe went through, and yeah, it's like don't be a terrible person. That's like basically what it comes down to. It will catch up.
Especially if you're in the public eye. Like I mean, you'd think by now that people would learn that if you are a high profile personality, like you've got a freaking target on your head, on your forehead, and you slip up once and it could be over,
Yeah, I mean, I think I thought about this afterwards because I was pretty quick, and I'm not usually someone who jumps into these sort of things, or and I'm usually somebody who waits for, waits for the receipts, so
Mm.
to speak. But I know I wouldn't say that I'm friends with Chris Gore at all, but I'm certainly an acquaintance of his. We hung out at Atlantic City Boardwalk Con one year. Chris is a really nice guy, and I have no reason to disbelieve anything that he told me back in the day. So when these allegations come out, I immediately was like, yeah, no, I can totally see this.
Yeah.
This vibes with everything that I've heard. I feel really bad because Chloe seems like a really sweet, and a sweet person that kind of got caught up in this guy's fame and this guy's persona, and then was mistreated. So it's heartbreaking. At the same time, and I'm not in any way making excuses for Chris Hardwick, but at the same time, he's obviously a very damaged person to exert that kind of control over a girlfriend, and to kind of have that, that to abuse her in that way. So at the same time, I think that he's somebody who needs to seek some help, and
Yeah.
it's because obviously there's issues there. I kind of said, when one person asked me what I thought was going on there, and I said, well, you may have heard stories that he was like a fat kid that got bullied, and instead of that making him a more compassionate and humble person, it kind of made him this driven and resentful person that's
Yeah.
obsessed with fame and obsessed with possessions. And I think that Chloe just became another possession to him to be treated however he saw fit.
Yeah.
And
Wow. It's
he's paying the price now, and I rightfully so.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what, because you hear about things like this, and it's sort of, people close to the situation are usually like, yeah, it's about time. It's kind of with, Harvey Weinstein, obviously, anybody who was around that situation knew he was, scum, basically. I mean, for lack of a better term, but then sometimes you're just like completely caught off guard by people. You're just like, wow, I never thought, so-and-so would do this. But again, it's amazing how well that celebrities can kind of cover that, or their PR people can cover that, or just the public just doesn't care. I don't know. I think going forward that most people in the public eye are probably going to have a more of a magnifying glass on their personal lives now, because of the Me Too movement and all of this stuff going on.
Well, hopefully people look at the way that they conduct themselves, and
Yeah.
deal with some of their problems that make them act out and mistreat people. I've worked in this industry. I've seen a lot of megalomaniacs. I've seen a lot of people mistreated. I've seen sexism. I've seen all of it. I've just seen everything that's happened, and I know people who have dealt with horrible things, and I've been somebody who's been like, I tend to get worked up, and I'm like, I'm going to go and I'm going to start this crusade, and I'm going to burn this person around. And then they tell you, no, I don't want you to do that. I'll talk about it when the time is right, when I feel like I'm ready to talk about it. And all you can do is respect that. As much as you want to go to bat, sometimes you just have to let the people who are, it's not your. It sounds callous to say, but it's not your fight until they have their moment. You know what I mean? Like, it's not up to me to speak for somebody else when they don't want me to speak for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, there'd be some people that disagree with that, obviously, but
I mean, and if somebody's got a valid point about that, I'm happy to listen to it. I just I know friends who have asked me not to get involved with situations that they're, and I have to respect that, because I have to respect them.
Now, do you think that sometimes, I'm trying to figure out how to come out and say, like, do you think sometimes it goes a little too far? Do you think they get the torches and pitchforks out before there's sufficient evidence? I'm trying to think how to say that without sounding like a complete douchebag.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's a real problem with call out culture. I think that we want to believe people who claim that they've been victimized, and we want to immediately rush to their defense. But as much as as bad as this is going to sound, sometimes people make things up, and sometimes people lie. There have been cases where people have been accused of things that it turns out that they didn't do, or they've even gone to jail, and then later the person recants, and they were just angry with them. So I think it goes both ways. There's a rush to judgment to condemn the person, and then there's also the rush to judgment the other side, to just dismiss someone's claims and say, oh, it's an angry ex. Oh, it's just a gold digger. She's trying to she's just a fame whore. Just trying to get attention. So I think that, I don't know, it's another one of those things where it's like we've lost nuance, and we
Yeah.
kind of jump into the middle of things. So I'm always willing to extend belief to somebody who claims that they've been victimized, but then at the same time, the accusation cannot be the proof. There has to be more to it, and in this case, I think there definitely was. There was a lot
Yeah.
of people that came out and said, no, I've witnessed this, I've seen this level of mistreatment. So
I did a story on John Lasseter a couple of weeks ago on the Disney blog I work for, and the comments on Facebook were scathing because I basically said, hey, because of the accusations that he's been a little too touchy-feely with coworkers at Pixar, that he's made unwanted, advances, hugging, whatever. I had somebody blast me and say that, why don't you just come out and call it what it is, sexual abuse? And I'm like, well, no, because the Walt Disney Company is actually keeping John Lasseter on through the end of the year, and they would not be doing that if he was actually abusing his coworkers. I think from my understanding, is he made people uncomfortable with all of the hugging and touching. It sometimes got a little out of control when alcohol was involved, but nobody was actually sexually assaulted or anything like that. And it kind of blew my mind in a way, because I'm like, look, did you actually read the article? Because I cited examples of what the grievances actually were, and the steps that Disney is taking, and immediately you're like, he's a sexual deviant and he needs to be burned at the stake. And I just don't know if people, again, with a nuance, like, I don't know if they are blurring the lines between verbal harassment, physical harassment, maybe somebody just being kind of creepy, and like outright, sexual abuse. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I haven't read anything in particular. Everything that I've read on the Lasseter situation has been kind of just very, very kind of like surface. There's no like specific, like, here's a list of allegations from this person that this happened.
I'm just looking at it from the outside, but as I understand it, he made people, anybody who works at Pixar, and I'm sure people who've worked at Pixar, John Lasseter is very huggy. He likes to hug people. In fact, when you're hired by Pixar, you were told that John Lasseter would hug you at some point during the day, because that's just how he rolls. And I guess it made people uncomfortable. There were certain social events where alcohol is involved, and he sort of came off like the creepy uncle. It really didn't set well with some of the people working there, and they're really. I mean, I guess the thing that kind of got me about that was there weren't any actual allegations like John Lasseter did XYZ to so-and-so on this particular date. Because of that, we're terminating him. It was more like there's a cloud around Mr. Lasseter. People are uncomfortable with him, so we're sort of grandfathering him out, and he'll be with us till the end of the year as a consultant, and after that he's retired. It's just sort of a weird, like, that one's handled completely different than the other ones, where it's like, yeah, this person's bad news and they're out the door. Even Chris Hardwick, like, oh, there's an allegation, okay, well, we're stripping his name off his website and everything else, like, this dude's done. And whereas with Lasseter, it's just sort of this like gradual sort of like, hey, John, it's there's just this cloud, and we can't really tell you exactly what the problem is, but people don't like you. Hope you understand.
Yeah, I mean, if a good percentage of your workforce is uncomfortable coming to work every day,
Yeah.
because they're going to get touched, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand. I am not a very huggy guy. My wife's family, they have a hard time with me sometimes, because I'm just sort of like, I don't do random hugs. I just sort of like stand there like, why are you touching me? But it would kind of make me a little nervous. I just make sure that I would, like, not be around when he was in the office or something. But it was this weird thing. I was trying to find, like, specifically, like, what is it exactly? Why exactly is he being terminated? But he wasn't even being fired. They're just sort of like phasing him out. Like, he's going to be there through the end of the year. He's still on salary. He's going to be considered a consultant, and then he's going to sort of pass the baton to Pete Docter, I guess, is what I've heard. But again, there's no specific. Just people are kind of creeped out by you, John. Hope you understand.
I love what you said earlier about the fact that, like, people were told when they got hired, like, at some point John Lasseter will hug you.
It's true. It's 100% true.
I immediately got this mental picture of, like, some guy who's being hired for the janitorial staff, and they're like, okay, you've signed all your paperwork, we'll get this process. Oh, and by the way, here's John Lasseter to hug you. Like, he just comes into every hiring meeting and is immediately there to hug people.
That's what he does. They actually had one of the articles I cited, I think it was the New York Times. They actually had 48 instances of John Lasseter hugging Pixar coworkers in the 2 or 3 hours that they were shadowing him. It's like, I don't even understand how that works. But
was he men as well as women, or was it just women?
Men and women. But I guess the women now. Again, this is, that nebulous allegation, like what is actually going on. I guess when alcohol is involved, sometimes he would touch women on the leg, lean in closer. And that's sort of, like I said, there's no actual like assault involved per se. It was just very, very creepy and uncomfortable. But
overly familiar.
Yeah. Like I said, it kind of reminded me more of a creepy uncle, than anything. But which is unfortunate because he did so much for the Walt Disney Company. I mean, I do not think the Walt Disney Company would be where it's at at least the animation department without John Lasseter's input. And it always stinks when you have someone who you really look up to turn out to be creepy. It's always a huge blow.
It's tough. It's this is why they say don't have heroes.
Yeah,
they will disappoint you. Everybody's a human being, and everybody's complex, and everybody's got flaws, and we expect people to be perfect, and I just don't think that's a realistic expectation. And I think that when we expect people to be perfect and that's why you see like all these people that do all this do all this tweeting and all these things, like all these male feminists that it turns out that they're just covering for a crazy amount of skeletons in their closet.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that shouldn't surprise anybody at this point is like, people who protest the most, tend to be the ones who are actually participating in the offending activities. But I don't know. I mean, that's a whole nother. But this is a huge blow, kind of to, I guess the pop culture scene, the geek scene. I mean, because Hardwick he was the man. Like, he started Nerdist. He was, huge at Meltdown Comics. He's been a huge figure in pop culture. I think he's been instrumental in sort of mainstreaming geek culture over the last few years. And then to have this happen, and then just like within like 48 hours, like he's just like wiped from the internet, save for the bad press.
Well, I think part of the problem is that, a lot of it, he came off as a narcissist, so it was really easy for people to say like, oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna deny that. I mean, he definitely, he knows he's the man, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's just and determined to, he would bring every year at Comic-Con at Hall H, he would bring panels that people waited outside for hours to see. He'd bring them to a screeching halt so he could take pictures with the celebrities for his Instagram. It's like you can't do that backstage. Like, no, because the celebrities leave and he has to stay on stage. It just kind of like everything seemed really like self-serving, and it just seemed like there was a lot of going on there. So when something like that comes out and it's like, yeah, look at this level of control that he tried to exert on this this girl that he was seeing.
Right.
Even people who who haven't like had any background knowledge or heard anything from a degree of separation or things like that find it really easy to go, oh yeah, no, I buy it. I can see it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, a lot of times you look back at, even like with Kevin Spacey and stuff, and then it just kind of clicks. Like you start to remember, like, oh, I heard whatever, 10 years ago or something came up like
Kevin Spacey getting caught in the park with somebody. At, 2005 back at Tokyo Pop. So, it wasn't, he chose, I think it was Billy Eichner who said the day that all those allegations came out, he said, wow, Kevin Spacey did something I didn't think possible. Choose a bad time to come out.
Yeah, right.
He tried to deflect all the allegations.
Oh, God.
I'll live my life as a gay man. And it was like, dude, what are you doing? Come on.
Yeah. But yeah, just, I mean, it does, you're right. It does kind of, a lot of times it does just sort of click. And, all the stories over the years is just all sort of like, it's like that, lucid moment. You're like, oh yeah, okay. Yep. That's right. That's who they are. Oh boy. Yeah. So I don't even know where to go with this because we're all over the place, and I'm definitely gonna have to do some editing because I haven't had nearly enough alcohol.
Any conversation you ever have with me will always go all over the place. I'm like,
Well, this is my fault because I was trying to like shoehorn like two topics into one show. So, but I guess I guess I'm gonna ask you. So, Chris Hardwick aside, where do you see pop culture going? Where do you see the comic book industry going from here? Do you think it's like can it be saved at this point, or is it just like Hardwick's career? Is it a lost cause? It's over.
I honestly don't think that it can survive in its current form for for even 5 more years. I think something's got to change. Either something with the way that comics are distributed, something with Diamond's monopoly hold on the distribution of comics, the way that they've gotten out to shops. The direct market has been a very slow vice around the neck of comics. Once they abandoned the newsstands, that was kind of like the beginning of the end, and it's just been a slow death for a couple decades now. That's where I discovered comics. I used to go to thrifties, and they'd be on the spinner rack, and I'd grab a bunch of books and buy them with my allowance and go home and read them. Mm-hmm. And now there's so much competition, from video games, from Netflix, from things like that kids can do. Kids go. YouTube is huge because kids go and watch free videos. And hey, I recognize that. I started a channel. It's a bunch of nonsense, but it's fun to do. Just because I realized that I'm not gonna. I really like the interaction with fans and with the comics community, but I'm not going to have that, with just writing books here and there.
Yeah.
On the occasion that some editor decides to throw me a bone.
Yeah.
So I've got to kind of like build my own audience, and we've got to do our own projects and do our own books, and I think that's where the future is. I think that Indiegogo is proving right now.
Yeah.
That you don't need the comic publishers anymore. You really don't. You just need an audience, and it's a kind of like a direct to consumer, sales model, and I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Cam and I were talking. I mean, it's sort of like the rest of the comic book industry is coming around to things that webcomics people have known for years, which is making that personal connection with your audience and then selling to them directly. Webcomics have been doing it, for a while now, but the rest of the comic book industry, I think, is really starting to catch on now that like this might be the only way that we survive, in the short term anyway, until we come up with a better distribution model.
Yeah, I think there's a reason that Scott Snyder just started the YouTube channel. Yeah. I think that people are looking at Ethan Van Sciver and his success, and they're saying how can I duplicate that, because the comic industry, that pie is getting smaller and smaller, and the money is less and less.
Yeah, I can't even, I mean, back to the very beginning of the show where you said about the grouchy comics creator telling you not to do comics. I become that guy. Like, I seriously can't recommend to anybody, any starry-eyed kid to get into comics right now. I would tell them, go make your own comic, build an audience, and if you have enough people to like your stuff, then maybe they'll buy some stuff. But I would never tell anybody to go to school, to go to work for freaking Marvel Comics, now, because you don't know if you're going to have a job.
Well, it's funny. I tell that story and people always go, oh, he crushed your childhood dream. But in retrospect, he was right. I should have listened to him. I should have, I should have done something like that. I'd have a big house and.
Well, you got a few good years out of it, though. I mean, comics, it's great. I mean, there's some great people here. It's a great community. It's just, I think right now, a lot of the issues on social media, personally, I think it's just fear. I think fear of the bottom falling out, knowing that the bottom is falling out, knowing that there aren't enough resources for everybody. So people are just sort of like, eating each other. It's like, it's sad. It's really sad to see, because I remember you go back 5 or 10 years and it was just a totally different vibe than it is now.
Yeah, I really love making comics. I love all the time that I've been in the industry and I've been able to do it. I love telling stories, and I love the interaction with the fans. I've never had a lot of negative interaction with the fans, but I think that part of that is the fact that I don't go out and I don't antagonize anybody. My Twitter account is very, every now and then I'll say something snarky that I think is funny and maybe someone will object, but I'm always quick to let them know where I'm coming from, and to just be kind. I find even if someone like wrote to me today and was like, I think your comics suck, my response would be like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Tell me, if you give me particulars, I'll listen, and maybe I can, maybe the next thing I write will be more to your liking.
Yeah.
I'm in the business of selling things to you, and you as a consumer have the right to tell me whether or not you like it or what you don't like about it. And as long as you're respectful, then I have no problem, responding to criticism. But, if I go out and I say something shitty and then somebody, I get called on it, I don't feel like I'm being harassed. I said something shitty and someone's calling me on it. That happens all the time. That happens with my assistant editor.
Yeah. Be nice. What was it? Bill and Ted. Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes.
I'm the professional. It's like I'm always going to try to be the professional. I'm always going to try to be the bigger person. You're going to run into internet trolls, and I don't necessarily blame people who, eventually just get fed up and block a person because, Twitter is like, it's your living room. And if somebody comes to your living room window and starts screaming in it, you have the right to shut the window. But, at the same time, I don't think that painting people with a broad brush and just, blocking huge swaths of people, I don't think that's going to sell any books for you.
Yeah, I'm actually blocked by several people, some of which I know in real life just because I followed the wrong people on Twitter, or I've tweeted at the wrong people on Twitter. Absolute insanity. I just never thought it would get to this point, but here we are. So can only go up from here, right?
I've noticed a few people that I'm blocked by that I have, it'll just be something where someone will retweet something and I'll be interested in it, and then it'll say this tweet is unavailable, and then I'll go to look at the unavailable tweet and I'll be blocked. And I'm like, oh, I wonder, for the longest time, I didn't know why that was. And then, when I found out what blockchains are and things like that, more recently, I found that out. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I must follow somebody that they don't like.
Yeah.
And my follows do not necessarily equal endorsement. I follow all kinds of thinkers that I vehemently disagree with, but I like to follow people that I disagree with. I like to see what they're saying, because I like to test my ideas and my thoughts and my beliefs. So, I like those kinds of conversations. And I guess, people don't have to be that way, but I don't think that they should necessarily like condemn me because, I don't like being in an echo chamber. I like to have other ideas. I think that makes you a better writer. It's like, even if you disagree with this, at least you understand how they think. And then if you have to write a character with those beliefs, you now have something to model it off of.
Yeah. Good times, man. It's definitely an interesting time to be in comics. To bring this to close, because we've been doing this for like an hour now. But to wrap it up, I would say, let's see, some life advice for young cartoonists would be to be nice and keep it in your pants. Is that what we've cut the consensus here?
If you're a comic book writer, you have a pretty good model of upright, upstanding characters. Try to be more like them.
Yeah, everybody needs to be more like pre-Nazi Captain America, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, Aaron, where can everybody find you? Obviously, you're on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's just Aaron_Sparrow on Twitter, on Instagram. I also have my own YouTube channel, Dapper Dragon Media.
Okay.
Is just I just started a couple weeks ago. A lot of it's
awesome.
Just action figure unboxing with my bearded dragon, and just but we've done some other videos. We've done some drawing hangouts with my artist on Darkwing Duck, James Silvani.
Yes.
With our Amy Meverson, where we'll take requests and they'll doodle while we just have a nonsense conversation. So yeah, just trying to have fun and trying to just build a community of comic fans that just want to hang out and have a good time.
We'll have to have you guys on the show again another time and talk about Darkwing Duck. I just didn't think that Darkwing Duck and sexual harassment really went well together.
Yeah, I think that's a wise decision. I support it fully.
Yeah, the terror that flaps in the night, just not something you want to think about. When terror that faps in the night. No. Anyway.
Yeah, let's not combine those two things.
No. That's another conversation. Okay, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Neil.
All right. Bye.
Bye.